All projects start simple, and the timelines never seem that bad. At least when you imagine them, and at some point they take a turn into a repair rabbit hole. This isn't a bad thing by any means, it's just how small jobs and low budgets become complicated, replace anything at all cost style repairs. Especially when you plan on daily driving the project vehicle, or going on any adventures where it will get used hard. My 2002 Xterra is no exception. What started as a head gasket repair has quickly turned into replacing a ton of other components. Some that I've replaced over the years that are probably still fine, and some that are surprisingly worn out or just flat out bad. But since I'm in there, and the engine is coming apart anyways, I might as well make sure it's good as new. This Xterra project is really drug on. What started out as a head gasket repair is quickly turning into potentially pulling the whole entire engine out and rebuilding the motor and working on some front end components while the engine's out type repair. And that's okay. Some of my favorite projects have happened just like the Xterra. Started out simple, ended up complicated and a little more expensive than I originally planned, but in the long run, it was well worth it. And I get the feeling this is going to be one of those projects. Today, we're going to take the heat shields off the exhaust manifolds so we can disconnect the exhaust manifolds from the collectors and the rest of the exhaust system. We're going to take the crank pulley out. That way we can inspect the timing belt. And hopefully by the end of the episode, we're going to be able to make a decision on whether the motor's coming out or not. And maybe pull the motor out, I don't know. We'll see. So stay tuned. In order to get access to the exhaust manifolds, you first have to remove the heat shields. Each side is held on by 3 bolts, and the bolt locations are slightly different on each side due to how the exhaust manifold mates to each collector. The locations of the bolt heads are tucked down in the engine bay some, with the passenger side heat shield being more difficult to get access to due to all of the wires and lines running over it. You're going to want to use a long reach wrench and a series of extensions. The socket size is 10 millimeters, and I ended up using a 1/4 inch drive variant due to the smaller size giving me slightly more access. I have a set of long metric 12 spine ratcheting wrenches, and also a long slim profile driver with a swivel head that worked perfect for getting access to the bolt heads. Be patient and make sure the socket is seated flush on the bolt head because these bolt heads will want to strip, especially when you try to first break them free. My heat shields have never been off, and while the bolts aren't torqued down too much from the factory, they can be a little hard to break free due to light rust and corrosion. All but one bolt came out of my heat shields just fine. The bolt that gave me the most trouble was on the passenger side closest to the firewall. I thought I had the socket on flush, but the bolt head seemed to want to round. In order to get it off, I ended up stepping down to a 3/8 socket and forcing it on the bolt head. This slightly smaller size gave me just enough bite to get the bolt out, but probably means I'll need to get a new 3/8 socket. My 12 spline long reach ratcheting wrench also seemed to want to bite just a little too hard into the bolts, but it worked. You can see how the bolt locations are slightly different on each side, with the driver's side being much easier to get access to due to having easy access with the upper manifold out. This is tricky to get out, and I am not reusing these, that's for sure. But what I did was I just got in there, squeezed, and bent this little corner in, and it was able to clear coming up. This bolt head's probably ruined. I want my wrench more than I want this bolt right now. Got it. Okay, I'm back out in the shop. It's been like 4 days, and I've come out and I've pretty much coated every one of these bolts on the exhaust manifold and the collectors with PB Blaster, because my least favorite part about any engine removal or cylinder head removal is usually breaking off the exhaust manifolds. I think I've been scarred by having to extract rear exhaust manifold bolt studs too many times. And even welded once back there in an area that was not ideal to be welding. And I just don't want to push my luck. So I'll be really happy once I've got all these exhaust manifolds off the Xterra. Yeah, let's see what happens. Next, I need to disconnect the exhaust manifolds at the collectors. I've already soaked all the bolts in PB Blaster so they're ready to come off. I'll be using a 14mm socket and a combination of extensions and flex joints. The bolts are at an angle, and with all of the wiring near the collector, it's very difficult to get a flush fit without a flex joint, especially on the passenger side. I'm also going to be using a new Hercules compact 1/2-inch impact, which I picked up for jobs just like this. I did a review on this several episodes ago. Go check that video out if you're in the market for an impact. The combination of extensions, flex joints, and impact gun made easy work of breaking the nuts off the collector studs. I had one nut that started around early in the process, which is why I ended up going to a flex joint. Once the nuts are off the collector studs, use a 10mm E-Torx to remove the studs. I used a small 1/4-inch drive, and the compact size allowed for easy access for most of the studs. The studs came out very easy for me. This could be because they were already shocked with the impact, or they just weren't that corroded. The most challenging part of getting the studs out for me was that I had one E-Torx end that was mauled just bad enough that I couldn't get the socket on it. This was on the bolt that I felt the impact socket slip before I went to the flex joint, and I think that I might have caught the corner of the E-Torx with it. I ended up having to double up 2 of the exhaust collector nuts and backing the stud out with a small 14mm wrench. This wasn't hard, but it definitely took much more time than would have had it just come out normally. You can see here how the end of the stud was dinged up just bad enough that it couldn't seat inside the E-Torx socket. Okay, so by far the most challenging part for me to get the exhaust manifolds disconnected from the collectors is that I had one of the actual bolts, the E-Torx part of it, strip up a little bit. I think an impact socket caught a corner of it and dinged it just enough that the actual E-Torx 10mm socket would not go onto it. Yeah, easy to get off with 2 nuts, just a little time consuming. Gotta be a little patient with that one. Now it's time to get the crank off, and the first thing we have to do with that is to actually get the crank bolt out. This takes a 27mm socket, and in my case, the Hercules 1/2-inch compact impact. I have such tight space that I need to take the socket off because the impact doesn't have enough clearance with the crank bolt on it. Ugh. I also don't want to smash my condenser. Here we go. Woo! Bam. All right, it's next morning. I'm back out in the shop, making pretty good progress on getting everything ready to start pulling the heads. I think at this point, I'm just gonna pull the heads and leave the engine in there because I'm ready to drive this thing. And I'm afraid if I pull the motor out, which is probably the right thing to do because I've got a rear main seal leak and I've got some kind of leak coming from my actual oil pump up front, but it's really small and it looks like it might be at the oil pan. So if I remember right, last time I had this up, the oil pan mates with the oil pump. So I don't know, it's not bad enough to mess with because if the head gaskets didn't fail, I'd still be driving this. Things I've got left to do. I've got timing cover, timing belt. There's a backing bracket too that has to come off. I'll show you guys all on camera once I get in there. And then the heads come off and hopefully there's not a lot of coolant still inside the cylinder heads because I don't want to dump that inside the actual cylinder chambers. And some stuff on the back of the heads I got to get to. But for now, we're going to get the crank pulley off. Now I have a kind of hodgepodge of pulley removers. And in this case, I'm using a really old pulley remover I bought for super cheap at Advanced Auto Parts like 15 years ago. And it even has its own special case, a dead slime air compressor case. You can see like how precise this tool is. But one thing that's unique though is the bolt heads. The bolts you're going to want to use to extract this have to be a little long. So I picked these grade 8, super long 10 millimeter bolts. Well, that's the head. I don't know what the size of the, is that 6 mil? I don't know. Anyways, 10 millimeter bolt heads that are grade 8 and strong enough to actually remove this pulley. Because you have, if I get in there, you've got to have quite a bit of depth because we've got a 3-row crank pulley assembly for the alternator, the AC, and the water pump. So, and what I found was a lot of the crank or the pulley remover sets didn't come with a long enough bolt. I mean, that was a long time ago, but they probably do now. I don't know. I don't know what Harbor Freight's latest flavor of pulley removers comes with. I don't know. Just a little insight if you're pulling your pulley off, kind of a tongue twister. Make sure you've got an adequate length bolt in your kit. If you don't, just go down to the hardware store, spend a couple bucks and get the right ones and get them in the grade 8 variant so they're a little stiffer, a little stronger, and they don't bend. The other thing you're gonna wanna do is get in there, throw some kind of WD-40 or PB blaster inside the actual threads where you're gonna put your extractor bolts at and clean them up pretty good. Those are exposed to the elements and they can get all kinds of gunk in them. Once you think you've got them cleaned up, throw your bolts in there with a little bit of grease or, like I said, lube, and you can see, make sure you get in focus, how much bite I currently have just by the crud that's in there, and that's not good enough. You're gonna wanna clean that up and get as much bite as possible because you do have a lot of force when you're removing that pulley, and these tiny bolts will strip pretty easy, or they'll just break the threads off at the end of them. Or even worse, on the crank pulley, and then you're gonna have a nice time getting that off. You could use another type of pulley remover, but I don't know. Just take your time, clean it, and this is one of the more delicate acts when working on these old motors. Get the pulley off in one piece, so you're not going through a junkyard trying to figure out how to get a replacement pulley. I actually had to go in and chase this with one of my taps, and it has all kinds of crud built up in the actual holes that are used to pull the crank off. And I've had mine out 3 times. So really recommend feeling around in there with a bolt first, and then go ahead and if you don't feel like you're getting enough bite, bust out a good tap set and get in there and clean those threads out because you can see how much crud I pulled out of there. It's, you know, a combination of leaking fluids, dust, grime, road grime, who knows, whatever. Now I'm gonna go ahead and try to remove it again. The threaded holes inside my crank pulley were nasty. I'm taking my time here, working the bolts in with some PB blaster, evenly between the 2 bolts, making sure they've got enough bite for when I start removing the pulley, it actually comes off. Once I felt like they were deep enough, I started working the pulley remover and the pulley came off with ease. Crank pulley's out. Can't stress enough how patience goes a long ways with getting this out. I actually ran one of my removal bolts too far in and bent the flange of the timing cover just a little bit, which I can get that out and it'll be just fine. But yeah, these get pretty crusty over time, so take your time. Now I'm gonna take the timing cover off. So you do have a lot of bolt locations on the timing cover. You've got outer, that's where the crusty one just came out. There. Don't think there's one on the bottom down here. Maybe, can't feel anything. And then you've got right here, here, and I'll pull back out real quick. And then you've got the inside, which are super easy to forget. So when you start trying to get this thing off and you think it's stuck, you've got one there. Well, I had one there, I took it off there. And here, and here. And if I remember right, the top part comes off without it, or comes off separately too. So I'll probably take that off first. Timing cover's held on by a bunch of tiny 8mm bolts that also have a Phillips head on them, but I recommend using the 8mm 6-point socket. I've got one really crusty bolt. Not sure how that one got that bad. It also looks like it was dinged up a little bit. Do I dare try a Phillips head? Nope. Small vice grips. And you can get your manual bolts out. I'm not sure how that happened, but this thing's trashed. Whatever. It's rusty anyways. The lower timing belt cover comes off with the same size bolt and is pretty straightforward. Mine, however, has something going on the very bottom bolt. So I've got the crank pulley off, I've got the timing cover off, or the timing belt covers, both upper and lower, and I'm at a pretty good stopping point because I need to do some research. So the bottom timing belt cover, has a bottom bolt right here. And I totally forgot that when the timing belt snapped, okay, let me take that back. I didn't forget that when it snapped, it actually damaged the cast aluminum timing cover. I was just hoping it wasn't as bad as I remember. It actually was leaking. And what I forgot was it actually broke the bottom of the timing cover off. And so there's no provision to bolt the timing belt timing cover. I know it's a tongue twister. There's a lot of timing covers involved with this, but bear with me because I need to go find a part solution for the broken cast aluminum timing cover inside the Xterra now. I also need to figure out if I can do that with the engine in the Xterra. My gut instinct's telling me right now that the engine probably has to come out. And I was already on the fence of doing that. I just was very hopeful that once I got into this, started pulling parts apart, that I would catch some momentum and start seeing the light at the end of the project tunnel to get this thing back on the road in a couple weeks after parts come in. And start driving it, man. The thing's been in the garage more than it's been on the road since I moved back to Indiana. And so this cast aluminum part, and it's broken right down there, there should be an actual like tang on the bottom of that with a hole that's threaded for one of the timing belt cover bolts to go through. So not too big of a deal. I just have a ton of other projects and you can see how well that one's going. Need to get finished. So I'm gonna go call it a day for now. It's an afternoon, it's Friday, whatever. I'm gonna go and do a little research, check on some parts, and maybe just order a whole new engine. We'll see. Not a new engine, but something that was running. Maybe, I don't really even care at this point. I just want parts. Plus having something that I could build on the bench while this one's running would be pretty cool. And yeah, we'll see what I come up with.